folks. Well, today's topic is probably not the most pleasant one, at least for me it isn't, and that is agricultural herbicides that might be residues left in straw. Really wasn't something I was terribly concerned about when I first got these straw bales, mostly because my plan was to have them composted over a 2 or 3 year period of time, which certainly would have minimized the risk of herbicides that were left. But we recently got a real load of seeds from SEO Family Garden, and then another friend, CB at CB's Greenhouse and Garden, said, "Hey, you should plant in straw bales. Seems like a good idea. But first, I need to make sure that these straw bales are not going to kill my plants." And so that led me on a little bit of a search to find out what agricultural chemicals might be in the straw. Now, what most people don't realize is that pasture land that farmers feed cows and other animals that eat grass-type plants are frequently improved by treating the broadleaf weeds. And that's great. It's great for the hay, great for the straw, but it's not so great for other kinds of plants. The problem with this particular kind of herbicide, this is an aminopyrrolide, is it has a long half-life, meaning it takes a while for it to break down. And in particular, this particular chemical, which you may recognize as Milestone for a commercial product, or Grazon. Oh, by the way, did you also know that it's used in lawn fertilizers? That's right, lawn fertilizer. You know, the stuff that people in the suburbs put on their lawn to make it look beautiful without any large, ugly weeds. Well, it gets put in there too. Now, this whole issue really came to a head in around 2007, 2008, and it was first observed in the state of Washington. What happened was dairy manure was composted and given to home gardeners and small-scale gardeners. Well, that manure had this particular herbicide left in as a residue. So all of a sudden, organically grown gardens were dying. And I mean really dying. Pea shoots withered and died, the leaves curled, tomato leaves curled. Pretty much anything that you can think of gardening in a home garden for food did not do well. So the University of Washington started studying it, and they discovered that this Dow AgroSciences product had a relatively long half-life. And the problem with it is not just the half-life. One of the other problems is that grasses are very, very resistant to this herbicide. They don't die. But take a pea or soybean, for example. They can only tolerate 1/40th of the amount of herbicide that a grass can. Well, what happens is the pea doesn't sprout. Or if it sprouts, the shoots are smaller than average. And as they start growing and they get their normal leaves, the leaves cup, the tendrils don't come out the way they're supposed to, the plant is stunted, and a lot of times you don't get any peas from the plant. Well, the same thing goes for lettuce and tomatoes and squash and soybeans. And let's see, there's a whole list of products that Dow says don't use manure or compost that's been treated with their product. That includes potatoes, peas, beans, and other legumes. That's an awful lot of food. Carrots and other plants that are related to them. Tomatoes, lettuce, spinach, Swiss chard. Again, any large leafy green vegetable can get killed by this stuff. Oh, do you like to grow dahlias? Don't use it on dahlias. It'll kill them too. So, before I use these straw bales to grow a garden or to use it as compost, I'm going to make sure that it's safe to do so. Now, how do you do that? Well, the easy, obvious answer is not so cheap. You send a sample of your compost or a sample of the straw to a test lab. And for several $100s, they'll tell you if there's this herbicide present in the sample. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm not up for spending a couple $100 per sample to determine whether or not my 60 bales of hay, 60 bales of straw, are safe to use or not. Well, there's another way of going about this. When I was in high school, I worked with a college biologist, a tree farmer, and several other people to experiment using sewage treatment sludge on pasture land. Now, we had a whole series of tests that we ran on the soil, the hay, the effluent that came down the hill, and so on, to make sure that this treatment was safe. Well, everything came back fabulous. It was a really, really good use of this sewage treatment sludge, but for one problem. It turned out that somewhere upstream from the sewage treatment plant, there was a commercial business that was processing heavy metals. And instead of treating that material safely, they were just dumping it into the storm sewer and into the septic lines, which meant that we had heavy metals on the test pasture that we were using, which caused that entire project to stop because you can't continue to put heavy metals onto pasture land. Well, the same thing goes for herbicides. Now, it turns out that just like that pasture test that I did when I was much younger with sewage sludge, you can do a bioassay for this herbicide. And the way you go about doing that is you choose a seed for a plant that is very sensitive to the herbicide. And it turns out that peas, ordinary peas that you'd plant in your garden, or soybeans, are among the most sensitive plants to the herbicide. So, the process is to plant a number of seeds. In the case of compost, you mix soil and compost together and then plant pea seeds in pots and then water it as normal. And you grow it out for about 21 days. And you have another control sample which only uses known good soil. You can compare how fast they grow, the leaf shape, and any other abnormalities about the growth of the plants. Well, I'm going to run a test using 5 pea seeds in water that I've extracted from the straw and 5 pea seeds that I'm using my hydroponic water to cause it to sprout and grow. So I'll have a total of 10 plants that I'll be able to compare side by side. This bioassay method uses an extract from the straw. Now, what I'll show you how to do is how I sampled the straw bales, how I put the straw into a food-safe bucket. I used warm water in the kitchen to rehydrate the straw, mashed it down, mixed it up, and then let it set for 2 hours. And the reason why 2 hours is important is because this herbicide breaks down more quickly in wet environments. I didn't want it to sit in water for 8 hours or 12 hours or 24 hours. I wanted enough time to extract the herbicide from the straw. And then I'm going to use that water from the straw to water one set of the peas. The other one, as I said, will be watered using the hydroponic water. I'm going to go ahead and plant the pea seeds in the rock wool so I can watch them germinate and grow the first 3 sets of true leaves. I'm pushing the peas down into the rock wool so that they're below the surface. The point is to keep the peas damp so there's enough moisture for them to germinate. Now, I've marked each of these 2 trays, one with an H and the other with an S. H will be using the hydroponic water, S will be using the water that's been drawn off the straw. Remember, I let this set for 2 hours yesterday and then pulled the straw out. You can see what's left of the straw here. It's a little messy, but it will serve our purpose. Now all I'm going to do is dampen the rock wool and make sure there's water in the bottom. So that the rock wool gets saturated. This water looks really disgusting. There's a tremendous amount of dirt and other debris in with commercial straw. Now all we need to do is wait 7 to 10 days to watch these pea seeds sprout and then follow along in their development for the next 2 weeks. The whole point here is to let these peas grow for about 2 weeks so they get 3 sets of true leaves. And then we'll be looking at how those leaves developed. That will tell us whether or not there is an herbicide in the straw that we acquired. We don't know exactly where it came from. I have a pretty good idea this came from Yuma because that's where most of the straw is grown in this state. And interestingly enough, we found cotton bolls in the straw. So that means that, as far as I can tell, that this straw was grown next to cotton or within close proximity. So one of the issues that I'm going to have is determining whether or not the defoliant that was used for commercial cotton crop was used on this cotton and whether or not that has contaminated this straw as well. So follow along and we'll see what happens.